Right, so today we got to talk about the whole virus thing again. And this is from Daniel Levitz, and he says, just to recap what we know about, you know what? Number one, lockdowns increase deaths. Number two, Sweden was right. Number three, Neil Ferguson was wrong. Number four, masks are ineffective. Number five, 95% are asymptomatic. Number six, up to 80% may be immune. Number seven, it stops at around 20% of antibodies. And number eight means more cases does not mean more deaths. Now, as far as all of these claims go, I'm not saying they're all 100% correct because I haven't independently verified every one of them. I mean, but the one thing I do know is for sure the lockdowns have little to no effect on the deaths. In fact, like I said all along, I think that if we would have not locked down, but taken more serious precautions when it came to nursing homes and closed the borders, like when we first got forewarning, I think we would have had less deaths, and we would have had the luxury of not destroying our economy. So yeah, and Sweden was right. We know that beyond a shadow of a doubt now, and that's why I say that first point. Yeah, we know Neil Ferguson was wrong. I think he predicted like what was it, 2 million dead in the States? Like he was way over. I think he was like 10, 20 times the amount of dead. Um, so yeah, masks are ineffective. The vast majority are asymptomatic. I'm not sure about how many people are immune. I have no idea what that number is, but I would guess that it's a pretty high number. Um, 20% antibodies is the rough number that we do know of right now, because I mean you look at New York, you look at Sweden, that's about what they've found. And again, more cases does not mean more deaths. We've seen that's clearly been proven out recently, and that the amount of cases has gone up by quite a bit, especially in places like Ontario and Quebec. But the daily deaths haven't, right? And it was the same stuff in the states in like in July and August, right? Like the cases went up, but the deaths didn't, right? So the deaths actually went down by a decent amount. So that's another thing to bring up too, is that you have the mainstream media's freaking out and going into a paranoid frenzy over the last week or so because the cases are way up in Ontario and Quebec specifically, but even Alberta and BC as well. Um, but they don't tell you that the deaths are still down, right? Like having, let's say we had 100 cases a day and one new death on average in August, right, or July. And now we're having 200 new cases a day and one death still. Like, yeah, we're having a lot more cases, but the same amount of people are still dying, right? Like, if anything, that's actually a good thing because we're just going to get to herd immunity faster, right? Like, if we can have more cases, but yet the same or less people die, then it's actually a good thing, right? It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing in some ways, but I don't think it's a bad thing as a whole. So yeah, I mean, the whole, I mean, to sum it up here, the whole thing's been a complete lie, like a complete and utter lie. And as much as people, whenever you bring this up with people, one of the first things they point at, oh, hindsight's 2020. Well, I think you can argue that to an extent, but I don't believe that these quote unquote experts um, got things that wrong. I refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe it. Um, because they're still, I mean, a lot of these people are still pushing for lockdowns. They're still pushing for the mandatory mask stuff. I think that there is a greater agenda afoot. Now, what is that exactly? I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, I do think that there's a lot of sinister intentions going on. I think that's rather obvious at this point. But the main point being is that I don't believe that these people didn't know. Like I really don't. Like I don't think that someone can be a quote unquote expert and get make predictions and get them wrong on a magnitude of 10 to 100 times off. I don't believe that. I find that very hard to believe, right? Like very hard to believe. And the other, like I say, the other big problem too is that it's just the other thing that I would add is that this whole situation just proves just how easy we can, the media and politicians can um, get, the majority of the public to be paranoid about something they really don't need to be. Like they really don't need to be. Like this whole virus situation, it should be an afterthought at this point, at least for most people. Like, everybody should be going back to normal, aside from people that have, severe comorbidities or are over, like, 70 years old or maybe 60. But aside from that, everybody should be going back to normal. Like, everybody should be completely back to normal. There's absolutely no reason not to. Now, why does the government not want to do that? Well, many reasons. Number one, I think they like the amount of power that they can get out of this. Number two, um, I mean, the Canadian government specifically, they want to push for socialism, basically. Um, and if they can maintain, double digit unemployment, well, that makes a UBI, a lot more appealing to the general public than if we would have went back to normal when I said we should have, or when, anyone with a brain did, back in, I think, like I say, I think if you want to make the argument of, oh, we didn't know in March and April, fine. But going into May, there was no reason to not be reopened. So we should have been reopened since probably May. I mean, I think that was, looking back, that was a realistic time. It's exactly what I said at the time as well. Um, so yeah, that's what should have happened basically. But I think we're in for a lot more craziness. And again, speaking of that, this is from Brett Sears here, and he responds to CTV Kitchener saying, Waterloo Regional Council voted unanimously to extend its mask bylaw to May 31st, 2021. And he says, May 31st, 2021, are these people effing insane? Waterloo, stop this nonsense now. Don't wear a mask. Now, whether or not you wear a mask is completely up to you. I really don't care. But the idea of forcing people to wear them is absolutely insane, especially given the fact that we know that they don't do anything. Like, I just cannot stand these mask zealots. And they are zealots. Like, let's just be honest about it. And here's how you know. When we were having this debate, a month or two ago, should we have mandatory masks? I would always bring up to these people, number one, the evidence doesn't show that it works, but they vehemently deny that. So let's just forget about that. Um, the other big thing to point out is, oh, the vast majority of people do not wear masks properly. They just don't. And they would always point out, they would insist, oh, even if it's half the population wearing them properly, it's still better than none. Right? And I told them, oh, it doesn't matter, because if you're going to have mask wearing, you need like 90-95% of people wearing them properly, and then it's still going to have a minuscule effect. And like I say, nope, they doubled down. Oh, yeah, even if it's a small minority of people wearing them, it'll still be better than none. Yeah, and sure enough, they were proven completely wrong. And this is the big problem too. Like, are they ever going to admit that? No, they're not going to admit that, because these people are zealots, right? Like, they're complete zealots. And this is the other problem when it comes to this whole mask craziness that they're bringing up here, is that a lot of people think, oh, it's only till the end of winter. It's only, or even the people who think, oh, it's only for a couple months, once the cases go down. No, this is, my guess is that we're going to be wearing masks for years to come, like years to come. If I had to guess, right? And the fact that we already have places extending them to the end of May of next year, when they clearly don't work, yeah, I mean, temporary government programs are almost always not temporary. Again, that's one, you kind of don't really understand history if you actually think that temporary government programs end up being temporary, right? So, yeah, it's just absolute insanity. This is from Ezra Levant, and he links to a video here. I don't know exactly where this is. It definitely is not Canada, but nonetheless, he says 14-year-old boy, cop says he's wearing a mask wrong, so he tackles him and kneels on his neck. Public health, you see. Now, again, there's a couple of things to point out here. Number one, why have we gotten to this point in society to where we view this as acceptable? Like, seriously, why? Like, why? It's one person. Like, it's one person. It doesn't make any sense. And here's the other thing too: we have all these people that, oh, we're against police brutality. Like, oh, police brutality, the worst thing in the world. But yet they completely ignore um, clear and obvious cases of police brutality in this instance. Now, why did they do that? They don't actually care about police brutality. Like I say, if they did, they would be fine with acknowledging that police brutality is actually very rare, especially when it comes to the whole racism aspect. When it comes to this kind of stuff, it's actually somewhat common, it seems. Specifically, I mean, maybe not as much in Canada, but I mean, you look at in Australia and New Zealand and some of these places, yeah, like there's people showing up to police showing up to people's houses for Facebook posts, criticizing the lockdowns. Like seriously, like that is the point that they are at. And do I hear all these mask zealots or pro lockdown zealots um, saying, yeah, though I support the mask wearing, whatever, but that's a step too far. No, I've never seen any of that. Like never seen any of it. And that's the insanity of modern times, I guess, is that. And then this is the other problem too, is that the people that support this kind of stuff, the people that support the mandatory mask stuff and the lockdowns and all this kind of stuff, they don't have the critical thinking skills to think, hey, supporting this policy could lead to a much more draconian policy. Like the vast majority of them don't, right? Like the vast majority of them don't. And that's the problem, is that the average, like the problem when it comes to many policies these days is that the average person is so ignorant that they're just so ignorant basically, and that they can't possibly envision this kind of stuff. And then when it does happen, they're shocked and appalled, right? Like they're shocked and appalled. But yeah, anybody with half a brain could have predicted this. You support giving the government, completely and utterly unchecked power. Of course they're going to abuse it every now and then. Like it's just pure insanity to listen to these people. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is from the New York Post, and they have an article titled "Scientists Can't Explain Puzzling Lack of Virus Outbreaks in Africa." What I think it is, I don't know what they say it is. I'm not going to get into the article because I really don't care. But what I think it is that number one, Africa's a lot more isolated area. I think that plays into it, and because of that too, they don't have a CBC or a CNN that a decent percent of their population tunes into all day every day when they're locked down, and gets them all whipped up into a frenzy, right? So I think that that's one of the main things that came into it. And their governments just aren't taking it seriously. Like you had was it Mali? I don't remember which country, but yeah, the government or the president or the prime minister tested like a papaya and a goat, and they both tested positive, and he kicked the WHO and the health authorities out, right? So I think that's the other thing too, is that I don't think people realize just how fake. I mean, I'm not saying it's completely fake too. Whenever you bring that up to people, always strawman your what you're saying and say, oh, you think the entire pandemic's a hoax. No, I think it's a hoax to some degree, but it's not entirely a hoax. Um, but the part to get at is that I think there's a lot of false positive testing going on, and we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? Like we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. We had what? We had hundreds of NFL players test positive. All of them turned out to be false positives. We've had tons of cases of people who have never even got tested, have been told they tested positive. Again, so I think anybody who trusts these tests are kind of insane, if you ask me. Now, again, does that mean it's all a hoax? No, but it's just something that needs to be taken with an extreme grain of salt, which is exactly why when I hear these people that are all paranoid about it still, I just laugh at them, right? Like I just laugh at them. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check me out on Twitter, BitChute, and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.